welcome back. We've got another very exciting episode today. So we've got somebody who has been an animal rights activist probably his whole life, been very active and doing almost anything, crazy things that maybe other people aren't committed enough to do. We have one of the most famous animal rights activists, Mr. Ronnie Lee.
Hi, Chris. It's great to be on the show, and looking forward to answering all your questions.
Yeah. So I guess I go back all the way as far back as I can, and we'll try to paint a picture about who you are and then where you started, where you went, and where you are now. What were some of the first moments in your life when you felt some kind of connection to an animal, or you thought, hey, these things are special?
Well, from really quite an early age, I kind of I took action to protect animals. Thinking back when I was about 12 years old, I went with my family to a safari park, where there's kind of lions and tigers and animals like that, zebra, and it's like a glorified zoos, really. Just the animals have a bit more freedom there. And there was a lake where there were seals. There were seals in this lake. And myself and my mum and dad and my sister and I, along with some other people, we went out on a boat. It was like a kind of boat with an outboard motor. And the guy from the safari park basically had a bucket of fish. I'm sure there were dead fish in his bucket. And he was throwing them in the water to get the seals to come up to the boat, so the people in the boat could take photos of the seals. But one of the seals was impatient about this and actually jumped in the boat to grab the fish out of the bucket. And this guy beat the seal with a paddle. He had paddles in the boat in case the motor broke down, and he beat the seal with a paddle, you see. And I went mad. I called him all the names under the sun. You cruel bastard. And, and everyone else, especially my family, they were really embarrassed. Everyone else stayed quiet. And I had a right go at this guy. I'm going to get you the sack. And everything. And then when I got home, I phoned up the safari park, spoke to the manager and said, you've got to give this guy the sack. He beat the seal. And of course, once again, my parents were really embarrassed that I'd made this phone call. I said, don't get involved. And, and I said, no, I'm going to do that. And so that was when I was 12 years old, that I kind of took action that other people wouldn't take, or most other people wouldn't take. And there were other instances that, as I was kind of growing up, before I even knew about, vegetarianism or veganism or anything like that, I kind of seemed to have this thing in me to act to protect other animals.
Yeah, that's excellent. I also had similar experiences growing up, fishing and at a family reunion and having this experience with the fish and saying, oh, these things are cool. And then they get hooked. I didn't think much of it. But then when it came time to clean them, I must have been 5 or 6. And here they take this fish out, hit it on the head with a hammer. I just exploded crying. And they fried him up, put breading on him, put him in the frying pan, and then gave him back to me. And said, there's your fish. And I went down as like a toddler, went down and threw that breaded fish back into the river, just sobbing.
Yeah. I went fishing. My dad used to take me fishing when I was a teenager. And I stopped going because I came to the conclusion it was cruel, sticking the hook in the fish. Because what they use sometimes is they'd obviously use worms to catch the fish, but sometimes they'd use smaller fish to catch larger fish as well. And I just thought, no, I stopped going. I said to my dad, I don't want to go anymore. I'm not happy with it. And once again, that was probably when I was maybe 15, that kind of age.
Did your parents become a little bit more receptive to this as you were getting older and you were firm in your beliefs?
Not really. They were embarrassed. The incident with the seal at the seal at the safari park, they were embarrassed. and there were other things as well. I think they kind of wanted me just to be the same as everyone else, and I wasn't, and they kind of didn't like it. And then when I went vegetarian and then later vegan, they didn't like that either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, you do. And it was, I mean, later in life, my mum later in life kind of got more accepting of it, and she used to go, when myself and my wife went round to see her, she'd cook us vegan food, and she'd sit and eat the vegan food with us, and she would give she'd give money to various projects I was involved in for animal protection as well. So she kind of came round much more in later years. But certainly when I was a lot younger, no, my parents, they didn't like it at all.
It's akin to having some kind of disease, like your parents say, yeah, he's got the vegan, and we don't know what's going to happen.
It kind of was, because all their hopes for me went out the window, really. They wanted me to be a lawyer and be wealthy and live in a big house.
Uh-huh.
I didn't start training to be a lawyer, or solicitor, as we call it in the UK. And then, of course, I ended up being arrested and put in jail, and that was the end of that career.
Yeah.
Very disappointed. Their dreams of me, being this kind of big rich guy.
Quite the opposite, Mum.
It kind of was quite the opposite. Yes, I was the other side of the law.
Well, yeah, and the truth is, that there's no money in saving animals. It's a pro bono gig.
Kind of, yes. I mean, certainly the way I was doing it, it came as a big shock to them, and took them quite some while to kind of get used to it. I got used to it in the end, sort of.
Yeah,
but I still didn't really like it. But
I suppose vegan food is becoming more available. It starts to see maybe it's normal, but the parents are chained to this idea that I don't want a kid that's unusual. I want a kid that's just like the rest,
just normal, and gets a load of money and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, successful.
Yeah, success. That's kind of their concept of what being successful is. It's not my idea of it, but that's what most people think. And they were the same as most people, really. And later on, especially with my mum, she kind of got used to it, and she was sort of okay with it in the end, and she kind of understood that I was doing something worthwhile and had been doing something worthwhile, and she kind of accepted that. And even, as I said, she would, give some money out of her pension. She'd save up money and give it to me to, various projects I was involved in. So she kind of did change a lot, to be honest.
Was Mom before Dad, of course?
Well, my dad, I don't think my dad ever really came. I mean, he died quite a long time before my mum did.
Okay.
But I don't think he never really came round to accepting it in any way, I don't think.
Yeah, that's the masculine aspect of it's always going to be the toughest nut to crack.
Yeah, I think it can be. He was very traditional. And in fact, he died of bowel cancer, and I think it was his heavy meat diet that actually contributed to that in the end. And he was one of these people that just thought, well, you're going to eat meat, and I like meat, and I'm going to eat meat. And, that anyone that didn't was kind of weird. Yeah.
We still hear this today. Absolutely.
Of course.
I had to go look up, show me a vegan tough guy. And there's a few bodybuilders out there who I was like, thank God, because we need those guys to convert to these other tough guys.
Well, yes. I mean, it's always good to point out, vegan athletes to people that talk about vegans being weak. Mm-hmm. And it's strange, really, because that kind of had quite a lot to do with me kind of starting off on the road I've gone down, because it kind of all started off with me becoming vegetarian. And how I became vegetarian, this is when I was 18 years old. It was my sister's boyfriend at the time, who he later became her first husband. And he was vegetarian. I mean, he was only 17. I think they were only 17. My sister's a bit younger than me. And the first I heard was my mum was ranting and raving about, oh, your sister's going out with the real weirdo now. And I said, what was that? I said, he's one of these bloody vegetarians. And I thought, oh, well, I don't think I'd really hardly ever heard the word vegetarian before, and I thought I was curious. So I asked him and I asked my sister, why are you vegetarian? And he was, he'd been vegetarian since he was quite a young boy. And he was a really good athlete. He was really fit. He represented the county at athletics. And he said, well, we don't need to kill any animals to live, so it's wrong. Why are we doing that? And he was a real example of good health. And I was a huge meat eater at the time. I was one of these people that ate bacon rind, and I sucked the marrow out of bones, and I chewed on bones and crunched up chicken bones and all that. Shocking meat. And of course, so I was desperate to find an excuse to not go vegetarian because, of course, I cared about animals. I obviously had it in me to care about animals. And so it played on my mind, but I liked meat. So I was I like the taste of meat. And I was kind of desperately trying to find an excuse to stay as a meat eater. And I think if he'd been really unhealthy, I'd used that as an excuse. I thought, oh, well, it's, you're obviously meant to eat meat because, look, he's half dead, so obviously being a vegetarian. But because he was a healthy guy, that I couldn't use that as an excuse. So it kind of was important. And I think it is important that we try to be healthy as vegans. And I think it's good that there's these people, that are healthy, that are kind of I suppose examples of people in good health that we can use, because that knocks away an excuse that somebody might use.
Yeah. And I want to iterate to people out there that the reason why I look the way I do, it's not my vegan lifestyle. It's the fact that I drink big heaping glasses of gin every night because of the state of the world. So
I understand it can. Thankfully I probably gave up drinking about 6 years ago, which kind of, I think is one of the best things I did in my life. And the reason I did it was just made me so tired. And I couldn't, I'd have a drink and then I'd just go to sleep. And I thought, this is affecting my work, what I want to do for the animals. So that's why I kind of, I gave it up. But maybe something to do with age as well. It started affecting me more as I got older. But yeah, I absolutely take what you say about the state of the world. Yeah, it's kind of enough to drive anybody to gin. Yeah. 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 But you see, if you're a vegan, you could probably sustain more gin than somebody that's not a vegan. Perhaps there's that to be said for it. Yeah.
Well, for now, he's my friend that whispers in my ear, "Hey, it's okay. Everything will be all right."
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been a long time. I quit smoking about almost a year ago, smoking cigarettes, which was a horrible thing.
Yeah, I gave up smoking in prison.
Oh, really?
Enough. A lot of guys maybe even perhaps take up, but nearly almost every single guy I knew in prison smoked. It's universal that they smoke. Yeah. And they kind of smoke, they don't smoke like filter tips, they smoke the roll-ups. Because it's cheaper, they buy the tobacco and have roll-ups. And I was a smoker. This was my last sentence. The last prison sentence I had was my longest. It was a 10-year sentence that I got put in prison in 86, and then eventually got sentenced to 10 years. And out of that, I did kind of 6 years and 8 months. I was in jail. And when I went into jail, I was a smoker. I wouldn't say I was that really heavy smoker, but I was a smoker. And I thought, right, I've got this long sentence. So one way of fighting back and kind of not losing so many years, in a sense, is to get really healthy so that I live longer. To compensate for the time they've kind of taken off me. And so I kind of, with the help of another guy there was a guy in our trial that shared cell with me for a while, and he was really into fitness. and he gave me lots of help and advice and helped me. And I quit smoking, and I kind of I was overweight, and I kind of got down to a good weight, and started exercises. Started running when I was able to get to a prison where there was a field you could run round. I did that, and I got myself kind of really healthy, and kind of never looked back from that, really.
Wow.
So in a way, I mean, it perhaps could be said that if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't gone to prison and given up those things, would I still be here now? So perhaps it did me good in that sense, that it gave me the determination. Part of fighting back was getting healthy. I saw that as part of fighting back against what they'd done to me.
Was there some other wisdoms that came through during that time that were kind of a nice byproduct of being locked up?
Well, I think, I think you kind of got, you kind of do have more time to think. I mean, I was able to communicate with a lot of people in prison, through letters. I learned a few foreign languages, so I could communicate with. I mean, a lot of people in other countries speak English, but there's a lot that still don't. And so I was able to communicate with people in other countries that couldn't speak English or couldn't speak English very well. And so that helped, and kind of, giving people help and advice. I mean, obviously I had to be careful about, I couldn't really advise people to do anything illegal because they read the letter.
Right.
Prisoners read the letters, so I had to be careful with what I said. But certainly I was able to do that, and that was kind of a way I was still able to use my time productively and to still, campaign for animal liberation, through letters.
And you famously founded a what would you call it, a magazine or a zine during that time?
Yeah. What happened was that one of the reasons I was put in prison was because I was involved in a newsletter, really, magazine called the. I don't know if you can hear one of our cats out there.
Yeah.
I think she wants her food. She's a little bit early for feeding time, but I think she wants. That's what that is. She wants me to stop talking to you and go and feed her. But
I'll interview her next.
Interview her. She'll be much more interesting than me. This magazine, the A.L.F Supporters Group newsletter. It was obviously what it said. It was a magazine that supported the A.L.F, and there was all sorts of really blatant stuff in there. There was like kind of step-by-step guide to how to break into a laboratory and stuff like that. And I was kind of involved with that and wrote stuff for that, and they proved I wrote stuff for that, and that was one of the reasons I got that long sentence. And so after that magazine stopped publication for a while at least. And I thought something needs to fill the gap. We need a radical kind of animal liberation publication to fill the gap. And I came up with the idea of something called Arkangel, which is a kind of play on words because it was Ark was ARK in the title, so to do with animals. And I had to be careful with what was it. It couldn't be blatantly encouraging people to do illegal stuff because otherwise I'd have had more charges on me. But the first edition of that, I decided to publish that with the help of the help because there was a woman called Vivian Smith who was put in prison at the same time as me. And she had been the editor of the A.L.F Supporters Group newsletter, and she shared an office with me because I did the press office for the A.L.F, and she did the Supporters Group newsletter, and we shared an office. And she got sentenced to 4 years, so she was released, I think, after 2 years. So by this time she was out of prison. So she said that the first edition of that newsletter, I sent it all to her, and she made the first edition of Arkangel out of what I'd written there. And how I was able to write so much was, I mean, normally in prison, the only way you can send anything written out is in the form of letters. And the number of letters you can write are restricted, so you can't really write all that much. But they allowed me to hand all these sheets of written material out on visits, you see, so I was able to get a lot more out. But what happened was, after the first edition of Arkangel was published, there's an organisation over here called the Research Defence Society, and they're the people that promote animal experiments. And they complained to the government, said, why is this guy being allowed to write this? Really? So I got clamped down on. They said, well, you can write stuff in your ordinary letters, but you can't hand the stuff out on visits anymore. So that severely restricted how much I could write. But by that time, other people had come forward and said, well, we'll write articles, we'll contribute articles to it once it got going. And so it didn't really make a lot of difference, because I could still write some stuff, but there were a lot of other people contributing to it as well. And so it kind of actually went on for years. It's not published now. It hasn't been published now for a few years, Arkangel. But it did go on for a long time after that.
Mm. And technology has shifted a bit. If the kids are reading magazines or whatever, we'll do it online if we can and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. And videos are a big thing now, of course. And so stuff's changed like this. Yeah. And I think a lot of people now that become vegan, it's because of something they've seen online. Not exclusively. I think there's still a big role for stuff like leaflets and printed material.
And especially the visceral nature of video is also, especially when you're dealing with animal cruelty or something like that, I'm hoping that permeates people's brains a little harder, and then they go, whoa, no, I don't. No.
I think it can. Yes, I think it can do. But I think we have to use all media, all forms of providing information, right from videos to leaflets to posters to letters to local newspapers, even everything we can, every way we can spread the vegan animal liberation message, we need to be using it.
Art,
art as well, everything,
yeah. So I want to back up a bit and talk about some of the more spicy bits of your life. So you got radicalized at some point, and you started saying, you know what, I'm sick of this. I'm gonna start fucking some shit up. So what happened, and what was some of the? Because I know the story, but I wanted to know what you did and what was the strategy behind it.
Right. Well, how it all happened, it really kind of started with me becoming vegan, because, I'd already become vegetarian. And then 2.5 years later, when I was 21, I picked up a copy of the Vegetarian Society's magazine. And there was an article in there about veganism. And I hadn't heard of veganism before, and I didn't know, what happened to the cows and the calves. I didn't think there was anything wrong with milk production. And the same with eggs. I didn't know what happened to the hens. I thought they just laid eggs in fields and they were okay. Still hear the cat.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so I was horrified. And there's also stuff in the same magazine about hunting, about the fur trade, about animal experiments. So I didn't know about any of that either. I thought it's all much worse than I thought, and I have to do something about this. This is terrible. So I joined the Vegan Society, got information about veganism. I went vegan within a couple of weeks. And then I joined, I saw something on television about the Hunt Saboteurs, joined the Hunt Saboteurs. And it was really through my involvement with the Hunt. There was a few of us in the Hunt Sabs that kind of wanted to do action that was kind of more hard hitting. And we had a meeting. There were 6 of us. We had a meeting in London in June of 1973, and we decided to, form a direct action group that actually would cause damage. First of all, it was really directed against hunting. We wanted to go to the hunt kennels, go to the headquarters and damage their vehicles to stop them going hunting the next day. And we called ourselves the Band of Mercy, which is a kind of rather strange name. But in the 19th century, there was an RSPCA youth group called the Band of Mercy, and they were really quite militant, and they used to damage guns used by shooters and stuff. The RSPCA wouldn't do anything like that today, but that was, in the early days, I think maybe some of the people were more radical, or certainly more militant. And so we thought that would be good. Name ourselves, we revived that name, and so we called ourselves the Band of Mercy. And our first targets were the hunt kennels. We'd go to the hunt kennels and damage their vehicles to try to prevent them going hunting the next day. And then we found out about an animal research laboratory being built in kind of central England. And a couple of us went there. We went there twice, and we waited for the construction workers to leave, and then we set fire to the place. And we did. It wasn't destroyed, but I mean, the equivalent of something like £750,000 in today's money was done to it. So it was, quite, and the opening of it was delayed. It did open eventually, sadly. Yeah. And then the following year, we found that they used to do hunt baby seals off the coast of like kind of eastern England. And every year, these kind of fishermen would go out, and they'd go out in fishing boats, and then they'd launch inflatable dinghies and go to sandbanks where the baby seals were and shoot them, and then they'd sell their fur. So what we did, we attacked the fishing boats, and we destroyed one and badly damaged the other, and they weren't able to do the kill the seals that year. And then after that, after that, the following year and every year subsequently, they were refused licenses to do it by the government. So that actually ended. What we did played a big part in kind of ending it, because there was so much controversy over it that it kind of wasn't allowed to go on anymore.
That's incredible.
We one of our main targets. A lot of our targets were places that bred and supplied animals for laboratories, because they were easier targets than the laboratories because they didn't really have security. And so somebody sent us a list of these places, like a kind of insider who worked for some scientific establishment, sent this list, and we used it as a hit list, and we would go round and causing damage to, mainly we damaged the vehicles they used. Eventually, two of us got arrested on one of these places. We got caught, and ended up the police found the car. We thought we'd hidden the car that we were using, but they found it, and there's a lot of evidence in the car, and they searched our homes and found other stuff. And we ended up on quite a lot of charges. And this was in. We went to court in 75, and we each got 3 years. We were each sentenced to 3 years. But we only did 12 months because we'd not been in jail before. So, because of that, we got kind of released early. So I did 12 months, and by this time it was 76. And I found there were a lot of people, because of the publicity we'd got from what we did. I had a lot of people come up to me saying, I want to do the same. I want to do the same as you. I thought it would have put people off that we got put in jail, but it didn't. And people were going, I want to do that. How do I get into that? I thought it was brilliant. There's all these, mostly younger people. And that was when the name changed, because a lot of people didn't really like the name Band of Mercy. They thought, well, sounds like some religious organisation. It doesn't mention animals. So we changed the name to Liberation Front, because that was really what it was all about, you see. And that was in June of 76. And then things just continued from there. And because there were now more people involved, we were able to do kind of bigger actions.
Where does the front come from?
I think it was because at the time there were a lot of groups with the word front. I mean, there was like a group called the National Liberation Front who were fighting to free Algeria from the French.
Ah, okay.
And that was a big, so it was like to do with that. That was kind of where
it's a militant kind of.
It's a militant phrase. Yeah.
Because at this point in when you start talking about liberating animals, you have to be militant because of how much is really against it.
With those sort of actions, and we did. This is one of the things that kind of we were able to do. There was only one raid with the Band of Mercy where we liberated animals. That was where a couple of us took some guinea pigs from a breeding place. We hadn't gone there to take the guinea pigs. We'd gone there to damage their vehicle, but the vehicle wasn't there. And so we just rescued half a dozen guinea pigs and took them to a guy that looked after them for the rest of their lives. But now that with the A.L.F, because there were more people involved, we were able to do a lot more animal rescue, because normally with an animal rescue, you need more people. But to do damage, you probably only need a couple of people. But to take animals out of the place, especially if it's quite a large number of animals, you need a group of people. And so now we were able to do animal rescue, sometimes quite large scale animal rescues from places, from laboratories, from factory farms, from battery farms, rescuing the hens from the cages and that kind of thing. We did a lot of that.
Yeah. So I've heard you've done, actually, as a strategy, you have to have waves of people come in.
It was kind of, we sort of, the kind of strategy of the A.L.F kind of changed as time went on. First of all, the Band of Mercy was just causing damage, causing what was normally a fairly small amount of damage to vehicles to stop them going hunting the next day. And then that kind of progressed. And then with the A.L.F, we were able to rescue animals kind of really quite frequently. But we also kind of increased things with regard to damage, because the idea now wasn't to do just the minimum damage to stop them doing something, but was to try and do the maximum damage to cause economic loss to that particular company, to try and put them out of business. So our thinking about damage changed from, like a small amount of damage to try to do as much as we could. And then the other thing was that we also kind of started thinking that, people would do an animal rescue, and there'd be an awful lot of planning went into it. And often there was more planning had to go into an animal rescue than if there was just damage being caused, because it was more complicated, getting the animals away and more people involved and everything. And, a lot of thought would go into it. And then people would just rescue animals and they wouldn't do any damage. And kind of that sort of, I wasn't happy with that. And some other people weren't happy with that, because we thought, well, it's a huge wasted opportunity. You've kind of taken the trouble to actually break into this place. You've maybe had to bypass alarms and stuff to get in there. You've got animals out, but you could have caused damage there and caused them a far greater economic loss than what those animals cost, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. And so we devised this plan of where there were two teams of people. There was one team that kind of made the entry into the place. Then they'd come away, and then the animal rescuers would go in and take the animals. And then the original team of people would go in after the animals were gone. That original team of people would go in and cause damage. So it was a way of kind of doing damage in animal rescue, but not jeopardizing the animals by having the same people do the damage that rescued the animals. Sure. Just get the animal away and then go back and do the damage. And that was a kind of strategy that we kind of tried to develop.
Would they just be able to fill those cages back up anyway, basically for free?
It depended on the circumstances. I think, for instance, with something like, say if we were you rescue hens from a battery farm from cages, they don't replace those hens, because with that operation, what they do is they, when the hens have come to their time for slaughter, because I think they only have them for 18 months, because after that the amount of eggs they lay reduces, gets reduced, becomes, and so they kill them all. They'd send them all off to slaughter at once, and then replace them all with young hens. So if you go and take hens out of there, they don't ever replace hens on an individual basis. So those aren't replaced. With other things, it kind of depends, and I think you have to kind of look at each individual operation and try to work out, is this a situation where those animals would just be replaced, or is it a situation where we have, because the worry was that you could rescue some animals just for another lot of animals to be condemned in their place. And so it's best to try and avoid that and to rescue animals in circumstances where that kind of doesn't really happen.
Mm. So this is where we come back to destroying everything on your way out the door.
Well, yes, it was to cause us maximum economic loss to the company to try to, and there were some laboratories that actually went out of business. We managed to put some out of business just through the kind of tax on them and stuff. But the other area where the A.L.F was like really successful in the UK was against the fur trade, because in the kind of 1980s, I mean, the A.L.F has always attacked, like, you kind of got two outlets for fur really in the UK. You had your first shop or your first store that was just dedicated to the sale of fur that would be on a high street, and quite often there were so many of them in the country that sometimes they'd just be in a little side street, and so they were really kind of everywhere, these fur stores. And then there were what we call the kind of department stores that sold all sorts of stuff, the big stores, and they'd often have a fur department. You see, so on one floor they'd be selling furniture, on another floor they'd be selling household goods, and then on another department they'd be selling fur. You see, and, quite often these were big fur departments, and so there was a campaign launched to kind of causing damage to all these places. And it resulted in the fur trade really in the UK being totally decimated. A lot of all these kind of smaller stores, the dedicated ones just with fur, went out of business, and the department stores stopped selling fur because it wasn't worth it. They thought to themselves, we're sustaining so much economic loss because we're selling fur, because of the damage that's being caused to our store. Mm. That it's kind of more profitable for us to stop selling fur, and so that's what they did. Wow. And so we've got a situation now in the UK where the production of fur is actually banned in the UK. It's been banned in the UK for probably best part of 20 years now. So no one's allowed to have a fur farm over here, or to kind of catch animals for fur. That's illegal. But fur still can be sold that's imported from other countries, you see. So that's the situation we've kind of got here. But even before that came about, the fur trade over here had been massively reduced. And now the only kind of high street stores that kind of sell fur, there's a few in London, and the only department store that sells fur is Harrods, once again in London. There's nowhere else in the country that you can kind of go into a place, a store, and buy fur. You can get it on the internet, and there's these places that are like maybe on a industrial estate, a trading estate, where you can make an appointment and go in. But it's not. You wouldn't know what it was. It's not like there's not a window. There's no shop window or anything like that. There's a few of those. That's all there is. It's completely been completely decimated, and that was largely to do with the A.L.F campaign.
Do you think it's also thankfully run out of fashion as well, or do you think it was with the help of?
I think yes. I mean, there were other campaigns as well. It wasn't just the A.L.F. There were campaigns to kind of educate people about what was involved in production of fur, and I think that had an impact. It went so people didn't want to be seen in a fur coat in case somebody had a go at them.
had a bucket of paint ready.
Told them names, or because that kind of just did happen. So I think yes. I think it kind of did go out of fashion as well. It was a combination of reasons why it declined, but I think the A.L.F did play a really big part in that.
I guarantee it did, because before the birth of the 70s, 80s, this is really back in the Stone Age when vegan was not. They said what? Who? What? They don't.
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, when was put in prison my first sentence. And I said I was a vegan. I said, I'm a vegan. Can I have a vegan diet? They said, well, what's the vegan? Didn't know what it was. When I explained it to them, they said, no, you can't have that diet. You can have the vegetarian diet. I said, well, there's a lot of things in the vegetarian diet I can't eat. And they said, oh, would you just have to leave them then? Just eat what you can eat, you see. So I went on hunger strike. I thought, I'm not having this. And I went on hunger strike. I was on hunger strike for 10 days. And then they agreed to give me a vegan diet. And I actually sat out, the prison officer that was in charge of the kitchen, I actually sat down with him and kind of worked out a vegan diet for me. It wasn't expensive. It was like, there's a lot of beans and lentils in it. That was kind of okay. You know, the ingredients were quite cheap, but it was it was nutritionally adequate.
Yeah.
And then after that kind of followed me around, and they probably thought, well, give this guy a vegan diet, otherwise it causes trouble. So when the prison I went to, I was given a vegan diet. And then eventually, like, the Vegan Society became involved in campaigning, you know, towards the government. And there was a group called the Vegan Prisoners Support Group, and they were, you know, involved in the campaign as well. And they managed in the end to get a universal right for vegans in prison to be given a vegan diet.
Is that still going today?
I believe it is. I mean, it's many years since I've been in prison, but I believe that is. I think kind of basically all you have to do if you're put in prison is say you're a vegan and you get a vegan diet.
Awesome.
So that's kind of this. It's the same with vegetarians. Same with people who are Jews or Muslims. They're given diets. You know, like for instance, they don't have pork in their diet, and it's the same. It's kind of on the same level as that you just get the vegan diet. Which is great, which is a lot different to what it was when I first went in.
So I have to ask you, with all the judges and lawyers and police and all these people that you deal with, but have no idea why you're doing what you're doing, were they hard on you? Did they call you names? Did they think you were crazy?
Well, I would say the police were kind of okay. You know, I think kind of in the early days, it was a new thing and it was difficult for them to understand what it was all about. I mean, you know, you'd get judges that were harsh, who would kind of say this, you know, this was akin to terrorism and, you know, all this kind of, and say all that kind of stuff. I mean, the judge that gave me 10 years, he was brought out of retirement. He was a really top judge who'd retired, and they brought him out of retirement to hear our case because they probably wanted, like, kind of someone that would give a big sentence, you know.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, they brought him out of retirement. He was a really one of the highest judges in the country.
We need the most old, conservative, traditional.
Yeah. Well, he'd been involved in. There was a group called the British Union of Fascists. You know, way back, I think around about the time of the war, around about that time, and he'd been involved in that. I mean, he was well right wing, this guy, and they thought, well, we'll kind of bring a hanging judge in.
Oh my God!
So I was quite relieved to get 10 years because my barrister, you know, the lawyer that kind of speaks in court, he told me I'll get 15 years. I thought I'd get 15 years. So when the judge said 10 years, I went, way, like that. And people said, what's he doing that for? He got 10 years, but I thought I was going to get 15 years. So it was a result, you see. So I only get 10 years, you know, which is kind of bad. But, like, you know, it's all relative, isn't it? If you're expecting.
Right.
Only 2/3 of what I was expecting.
Say pleasantly surprised. That's what I go through life pessimistic. That way, you know, if things turned out shitty, I can say I knew it, I was right. But if they turn out good, I can say, okay, that's
win-win, isn't it?
Win-win.
Kind of yeah, it was. But it's still a long time. But you know, I tried to approach it positively. And I said I did a lot of studying, and I corresponded with a lot of people in other countries and tried to keep myself fit. So
your mental health, did it suffer at some points? Did you have meltdowns and such while you were in there, or did you
to be honest, not really. No. I kind of always thought I really sort of avoided feeling sorry for myself because I always thought about the animals. I thought I've got no right to kind of feel sorry for myself because even though I'm in jail, my condition is so much better than all these animals that are, being kept in appalling conditions and are being sent for slaughter. And so I always kind of thought about that, and that, kept it in perspective.
That helps. That helps a lot. I go through all kinds of physical pain on a daily basis, and I just think I stub my toe or whatever. I just think, nope. There's somebody's got it worse.
Yeah. And I think if we can, it does help with our mental health because you can sink into kind of sometimes into sort of self-pity and stuff, and I think that if you keep that in perspective by thinking, well, what happens to the animals and kind of if I focus on fighting for the animals and take the focus away in that sense from my own problems, then that really does help.
Yeah. And empathy is just something that's one of the key character builders that you could possibly give yourself, is the idea to feel pain and feel emotions outside yourself and other people and things like that. So nowadays, things have changed. The A.L.F has become very decentralized, and everybody's allowed to kind of pick it up as they want to. And if you want to go help in the name of animals, create your own little thing, but it's best done in private for security reasons. In your opinion, what are some ways that people can get involved today? Not, don't say anything that's going to get you in trouble.
I think the A.L.F always was decentralized, and that was always the idea of the A.L.F. It was always, and that is really what enabled it to spread so much, because basically the A.L.F did have some basic principles. One was that we kind of really wanted people who were involved to be vegan or at least vegetarian, because of course, it's hypocritical otherwise, isn't it? If you're not trying yourself. And I mean, nowadays it would probably be vegan. In those days it was a lot harder to live as a vegan, so kind of we were probably happy with people being vegetarian. The second thing was that there were certain types of action. You couldn't kind of really give out a leaflet in the name of the A.L.F because that wasn't what we were about. We were direct action, and it was damage to property, and it was rescuing animals. That was the actions we did. And the third principle was really to do with, we would do our utmost not to harm life in our actions, not to harm other animals, and not to harm humans. You see, so those are basically the kind of three principles. And if someone carried out an action according to those principles, they could call themselves the A.L.F. They could say they're an A.L.F group and claim it as an A.L.F action. And so because joining the A.L.F didn't involve any kind of complicated kind of filling in forms or going through any kind of complicated process, you could just join by, who you were and what you did. It spread. A lot of people were able to get involved really easily, and it kind of spread really rapidly. It spread throughout the UK, and it spread all around the world. And the other thing was because it was kind of decentralized, because there was kind of people just did their own thing, call it the A.L.F if you do it according to those principles. There was no kind of big leader giving orders, and so it was very difficult for the authorities to stop it, because they kind of tried to depict me as a big leader, and that they gave everyone ranks in our trial, the big trial that was in 1987, the one where I got 10 years. They made out I was the general, someone else was my lieutenant. There was these guys that were area commanders, and then there was foot soldiers, and they gave everyone a rank. You see, made out that it was like this kind of army thing,
like it's a mafia,
and it was to probably give people bigger sentences, And so, of course, I was a general. Oh, he's in charge of everything. I'm put in jail. It kind of didn't really stop anything. Things just carried on because I wasn't giving people orders and telling people what to do at all. It didn't work like that. You see, so it was very, very difficult for them to kind of cut the head off, and cut the head off the organisation, destroy it, because there kind of wasn't a head to cut off. Yeah. And so it was that was a kind of those two things together enabled the A.L.F to spread, and the A.L.F to kind of become resilient to whatever the authorities tried to do. I mean, in the end, the authorities did kind of work out a formula of how to stop it through various means, and you know, the actions did become very much reduced, and now A.L.F. action is much less than it was, especially in the UK. It's strange that obviously in the past, the country where the A.L.F. or the countries, the state where the A.L.F. was the most active was the UK. But that isn't the case today. It's far more active in some other countries than it is in the UK now.
Interesting.
For various reasons. One of the reasons is because of the level of surveillance we have here. There's so many closed circuit cameras everywhere. Even on the roads, they can trace a car from one end of the country to the other. So it's really, really difficult to do something and get away with it. See, and if you're doing stuff that kind of carries like really heavy prison sentences, you're going to want to try and get away. I mean, our idea was always try to get away, don't get caught, so you can, live to fight another day. It's virtually impossible to do that now, which is why the direct action has changed massively now. The way people do direct action over here now has changed hugely than from the heyday of the A.L.F.
What are some leading countries in the fight in right now?
Quite a lot goes on in Germany. I noticed there's a lot of attacks on like hunting towers, that little shooting towers. They have these towers in the woods. They go up these towers, shoot the animals. Loads of those get destroyed in Germany. Yeah. And I think there are some countries, even like kind of South America, there's stuff, hear about stuff. I don't hear too much because I'm involved in different things these days. I'm very, very involved in vegan outreach rather than direct actions.
Sure.
You to hear a lot.
I would say you've done your time, and I don't want you to live any more of your life inside the can. Let other people do it. And everybody out there, young people, you've got some big empty shoes to fill. There's spaces available. Yeah. Go make use of yourself.
You see, what's kind of happened over here now is that, the reason I kind of stopped doing A.L.F. action was more that I didn't think it was sustainable because I knew the police were watching me all the time.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this, so I've got to think of some other way of campaigning. I started doing information stalls and campaigning in other ways because I knew that for me to carry on A.L.F. action wasn't sustainable. And it's kind of not really sustainable for anyone now because for various reasons. One is the level of surveillance. Another one is there's all these special police squads they set up, and they're much more into much more focused now on catching people that do that sort of thing, arresting them. Prison sentences are much higher now. They brought in special laws. They're kind of attacked from all angles. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of really difficult to in lots of ways to do that sort of campaign. But what's happening over here now, and this is something where people feel drawn to do some sort of direct action, and I kind of know that, especially with young people, they kind of want, I need to be active. There's that kind of need, isn't there? I don't really have that anymore, but I appreciate younger people and some people that aren't so young have that. What we've got in terms of direct action now is direct action where people don't try to avoid arrest, because what they're doing is low level in terms of the illegality. So if they get arrested, they're not going to get 10 years. They're not going to have the key thrown away. They're maybe going to get a few months. They might not even get a prison sentence. So people are able to just say, here I am, I'm doing this. I don't care if I'm filmed, and that's kind of, and so you've got groups like, there's DXC, direct action everywhere. And that's, that's kind of big in the USA, especially on the West Coast, isn't it?
Yeah.
DXC, and we got that in this country to some extent. We've got a group over here called Meet the Victims, and they kind of go en masse into somewhere like a factory farm or any animal farm and do filming, and they'll maybe try to get out. If they can't rescue all the animals, but if they see an animal that's kind of ill or poorly, they'll try and get that animal out sometimes, and there's that. And then the real big one is animal rebellion, who are like a kind of, it's to do with the climate crisis, and it came out of Extinction Rebellion, but they're focused on Indian animal agriculture and industrialized fishing, and they do, they'll carry out direct action. For instance, just recently, they blockaded a load of dairy supply depots by kind of gluing themselves to the trucks and, climbing up on top of buildings. And my wife was involved. She chained herself to the steering wheel of a big truck, blocking the entrance to one of these places.
Nice.
It was closed. They couldn't get in or out for 5 hours. And that happened. It happened to a lot of them. And like loads of them got arrested, but they're not going to get very much. A lot of the charges get dropped. And, if they do get jail, it's only, so it means that it's a kind of becomes then sustainable. People can do it over and over and over again. And that's the form really that direct action's taken now in the UK, and probably would have to take in a lot of other countries as well, because a lot of countries, I think, a lot of states are following the UK in all this kind of surveillance stuff and in laws and things. And so that's the new form of direct action that's kind of sustainable. And the thing about it is it's like kind of in the sense it kind of probably raises awareness more than the A.L.F did in terms of the publicity that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Because we weren't really that into raising awareness with the public. We saw the A.L.F, this is a direct attack on these industries that are oppressing other animals, and we're going to attack these industries, put them out of business. We're not bothered about the public. We don't need what the public think. Whereas I think now with this new form of direct action, it's something that kind of is kind of there's more kind of interface with the public. There's kind of, it gets kind of publicity that is sort of because the criminality isn't so serious. The stuff that's kind of written about it is more kind of the sort of stuff that ordinary people are able to learn from.
Yeah.
It's kind of much more educational. These campaigns are much more educational than their house was. And so in that sense, I think they're kind of, they've kind of got an advantage in terms of changing society at a fundamental level, because that involves educating ordinary people.
This is a bit of the opposite of what you went through, because you worked in secret, and one of the byproducts was they wrote about you, which was foolish on their part to put you in the newspaper, because when you got out, that you inspired so many people to get interested. And I think, and since then they've probably stopped. I'd noticed they stopped reporting on anarchists, animal rights activists, anybody who gets in trouble for doing stuff like that, because as soon as they publish their cause in the newspaper, some people will say, sounds all right to me.
Yeah, they talked about starving us of the oxygen of publicity.
Yeah, okay.
For that reason. And there was a deliberate ploy. I don't publish anything about these people. And so it became hard.
Wow.
It became quite hard to get things in the paper, you see. And one of the reasons I sort of became the press officer, and what happened was it kind of wasn't really a deliberate thing at first. What happened was after I'd been in prison twice, because I got the 3-year sentence, then I got a 12-month sentence for a raid on a place that bred mice for laboratories. We took some mice and we caused some damage to the vehicle there, and I got arrested and I got this 12-month sentence. And after that, I'd been in prison twice, and I was the kind of go-to guy, because I was known if A.L.F actions happened anywhere, and the media, the press, or the television or the radio, they wanted someone to talk more in depth about it, they'd always come to me, try and get in touch with me to speak, because I was identifiable. And so that eventually became to me, ended up with me sort of taking that on as an official role. I wasn't paid for anything, but I took it on as like more an official role. I kind of, became designated as the press officer, and I had a phone number that they could contact. So basically what would happen is someone would do an action. They'd phone up the press. They'd normally phone up like a central number, like the Press Association or something like that, phone them up, and say what they did, claim responsibility. And then if they kind of, then, if the newspapers or, any section of the media wanted more information about what's the reason people are doing this, and then any, more background stuff, they would then contact me, you see, and that's how it used to work. So a lot of the times I didn't know what had happened. They'd phone me up and say, oh, there's been this thing happen. I didn't know about it because somebody had done something, phoned the papers, and then they phoned me, and I was in the dark. Right, I say, well, what's happened then? And they tell me, I go, right, I'll comment on that,
And you just you repeat over and over, they like animals. What did you get about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would kind of depend on what I would say would depend on the type of action.
Oh.
A lot of it was against animal experimentation. Some would be against, like animal farming, against the food traders. So I'd obviously, say something a bit different depending on, I mean, fundamentally it's all the same, it's all about animal liberation. But the facts and figures I'd give would vary according to, what it was that was being attacked. So that's kind of how it worked. That was the sort of idea of the press office, really. But what I'd often find is that, very little of what I said would be republished. It would all about, these terrorists attacking this place, and, the poor guy that owns the place is going, I could be out of business, and it's all that, and they didn't really quite often.
They did. They must have done that with slavery too. It's like some people that try to free my slaves. Well,
that's it. And then, oh dear, and I'm going to go out of business. And
this poor slaveholder, he's going to be hurt. And
what's going to happen to my sugar and all that? It's the same. There's a lot of kind of similarities, I think, in those campaigns. And of course, the other thing people to remember, of course, it took, I mean, here in the UK, because we had the slave trade over here, and it took 80 years. The campaign to end that took 80 years. And that wasn't to end slavery, that was to end just the trade in slaves that were taken from Africa and then probably supplied, kind of across the pond,
All right, you can keep the ones you got, but you can't trade anymore.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of like that. So, but even to end the trade took 80 years of campaigning. So, people, and this is, I have to say to people like, our campaign, it's a marathon. It's something we have to stick at. It's a long-term thing. We're not really going to get a quick victory. This is a deeply entrenched form of oppression. And so we have to stick at it. Mm. And, I think some people that come into the movement, they kind of come in all guns firing. And then after being in it a couple of years and they don't see things moving very much, they become disillusioned and they stop doing stuff.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand this is a long-term struggle and we need stamina. We've got to keep going for years and years with it.
My wife just looked up there. The idea of veganism was around in the 1700s, where people who were considering that maybe we shouldn't be exploiting animals in this way or eating the meat and stuff like this. So it's not
Yeah, I think that there were people that kind of sort of pretty much adopted the principles of veganism and maybe lived on a vegan diet going back hundreds of years. But the actual term vegan only arose in, I think it was 1944 here in the UK. There was a guy called Donald Watson and his wife Dorothy, and they were the people that they were involved in the vegan society. Some people say it was Donald that coined the term, but then a lot of others say no, it wasn't. It was his wife, Dorothy. But in actual fact, the definition of veganism only came about in kind of 1950, 1951, and that was a guy called Leslie Cross, who was another guy involved in the vegan society. Up until then, people considered themselves vegan because they were like, stop consuming animal products, and they didn't believe animals should be exploited and oppressed. But there wasn't a actual definition of it, like a written down definition, and that only came about I think it was formulated in 1950 and published in 51 by Leslie Cross as a definition of veganism. Mm-hmm. So it being kind of sort of set in stone like that is kind of fairly recent. But there's certainly people, hundreds of years ago that had the same ideas and principles.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the point is it takes a long time and you can't give up.
No, that's right. I mean, we have to kind of dig in for a long fight. And I think there are, I think we can win.
Yeah.
I think certain things are required for us to win, for us to achieve animal liberation. I think it's doable. But it's not going to happen overnight, and we have to stick with it. And quite often, what we need to do isn't very exciting. I think there is a kind of exciting aspect to it. I mean, I think, what Animal Rebellion did recently was brilliant, because it hugely raised awareness, and from that awareness, there will be people that go vegan. So that's great. And so people that want to do that kind of thing, that's brilliant. That's absolutely. Yeah. But like most people that are vegan, for one reason or other, wouldn't be able to do that. They got family, they got jobs, they got other responsibilities. They can't afford to be arrested even for a minor thing.
It's a very select group of people that can risk it. Yeah,
group of people that are like young people that are kind of, haven't yet got any responsibilities. Older people who've had their responsibilities and those are over, or other people that for some reason or other, don't have a job they have to hold down, and they're able to risk arrest. And great, fantastic if people want to do stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. It's great, but not everyone can do it. And what we need to do is find stuff. Every single vegan can be involved in outreach, can be involved in spreading the vegan message, and that's kind of what we need. And a lot of stuff that people do is kind of really quite low level stuff, but it's still really important. We do a lot. Our local vegan group, we do a lot of what we call door dropping, which is delivering leaflets to people's homes. I think it's something that's quite easy in the UK because people have letterboxes in their door. You just put the leaflet through. I don't know. It's quite the same. I think in the USA, it's a bit more difficult to put things in people's mailboxes, isn't it? Or something that you could probably leave something on their porch, maybe. Yeah. But that kind of thing. And we hold, some information stands, do that in the street or at various community events, animal rescue events or environmental events where there's some kind of connection with veganism. You can just stand there and, have the information. All that kind of thing. And that's the sort of thing, no one's going to be arrested for doing any of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it people can kind of fit into their everyday life. If you're just kind of delivering leaflets, you can just do that. You've got an hour to spare. I've got an hour to spare. I'll go and do that. And that's kind of really the sort of thing that like really almost all vegans can do. There's some that can do the big stuff, get arrested and block places, and that's brilliant, But if you can't do that, don't think, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, the kind of more, the quieter stuff is just as important because it all adds up to the same thing. And we need to educate as many people as possible to become vegan, because then that changes the kind of the very ethos of society. And then that means that, there's an impact there through people's choices, through their lifestyles, through food choices makes a difference. But also politically, if you've got more vegans, you're going to have more vegan politicians, and you're going to have more vegans to vote for those politicians. So you can change the nature of the administration. Then you get proper laws protecting animals, laws promoting veganism.
Yeah.
So the education is vitally important. And I think a big problem, I'm sure exists all over the world with vegans, is that veganism tends to be about what people don't do. It's about avoiding. I'm avoiding animal products. I don't eat animal products. I don't go to the circus. I don't go to the zoo. I don't go to the horse racing. I don't want to contribute to these things. Mm-hmm. And that's great, but it's kind of not enough, because there's still loads of other people doing those things, and we've got to stop them.
Yeah.
You see, so really, it's kind of really important, but the percentage of vegans that are actually active, that kind of go out of their way to kind of spread the message in one way or another, is really small.
Yeah.
It's really, and that's a tragedy, really, because we've got so much potential. We've got all these people that like care about other animals. You know, they change their life. Something very fundamental in their life, like their diet, their lifestyle change because they care about other animals.
Yeah.
And yet, if they took that one step more and did a bit of education and changed other people, we'd really be well on our way. And so I think that's really important. And something that's kind of, in a sense, even more important than that, I've got this kind of term that I've sort of that's recently come up with, what I call golden vegans. See, what that is, it's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff people can do to promote veganism just as an individual. I mean, for instance, I always, when I'm out and about, I always carry like vegan leaflets with me. And if I'm in a public place, I'll leave them. You know, if I'm on public transport, I leave one on the seat. If I'm on a train, I'll put one on the seat, you know, on a bus. Or if I'm in a waiting room somewhere, I'll put, you know, or inside magazines or something like that. And everyone can do that. And people can even deliver leaflets on their own. Someone just gets some leaflets from an organisation or whatever, or you can get some printed themselves and think, well, I'll deliver these to people's homes. Or even put them under the windscreen wipers of cars or something, you know. You know, or in a parking lot. All right, I'm going to, you know, and you know that's, you know, and people can do it as individual. But there's kind of, if people can do stuff as like a small group, they can do more. They can maybe do information stands, and they can do, you know, do other events. And so I think the kind of, when I talk about golden vegans, I'm talking about people that instigate outreach. They're the people that instigate it. Mm-hmm. And we need them everywhere. And I think, you know, one of the problems we've got is, well, it's kind of, it's not a problem, it's a good thing, but like it's not enough. And what happens over here with vegan outreach, it tends to happen in the centre of big cities. And it's probably the same all over the world. Mm. That, you know, you get a group of vegans, they'll gather in the centre of a big city and they'll do an event promoting veganism. It might be, you know, Anonymous with Voices, Cuba Truth, or an Earthlings Experience, or whatever people. There's all sorts of different ones now, isn't there? They've got every shape you can imagine for the shape of the thing they do, except with the screens. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You know, Circle of Compassion, is it? That's one. And
yeah.
You know, there's every, you know, but you know, it's all good stuff, and it's all like adding to the, you know, sort of educational effort, and that's great that people do that. But the thing is, what about all the other places? What about the smaller cities, and what about the suburbs, the big cities, and what about the towns, and what about the villages where nothing happens? Yeah. And people live in those places, and you know, my idea is like more like community outreach, community vegan outreach, where people think about, how can I promote veganism in my own community? Okay, yeah, I can go into the big city with other people and do that, but what about my own community? How can I promote veganism in my own community? How can I encourage other vegans that live nearby to get involved with me, and we'll have a little group and we'll do outreach, you know, where we live. And, you know, if people did that, and like when I say about golden vegans, they're the people that stimulate. They're the people saying, right, who's with me? I'm going to do this. Who's coming with me? The person that instigates it, the instigator, right? And because unless someone instigates action, it never happens. It doesn't happen by magic. Someone's got to say, right, I'm doing this. Who's going to do it with me? And if we had those people everywhere, if in every kind of locality we had vegans that did that, we'd be flying. There'd be so much outreach would be happening. And to me, that's key. If we're going to achieve animal liberation, it's absolutely key that we have those instigators, that we have those kind of golden vegans. And people, and you know, people listen to this. I'd like to think, well, how can I be one of those people? How can I be a golden vegan? How can I be an instigator? Because those people are so important. They're absolutely vital. If we're going to achieve animal liberation, they're absolutely key. Those people are absolutely key to us achieving it. And it's such an important role that kind of, and you know, I'd like them to think about that. How can I, you know, or if you've got one of those people in your area already, then go help them.
Right.
Go help. Don't just sit there thinking, oh, I'll applaud them. Aren't they doing brilliant? Go help them. The more people help them, the more they can do.
I would like to encourage everybody out there to go out there with the message that there are 3 excellent reasons to become vegan, because it's good for you and your health, it's good for the environment, and it's also good for the animals. And so it's...
Yeah. I think that, I mean, absolutely right. I mean, you know, veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation. So there's a sense in which you can only be vegan for the animals because it's an animal liberation philosophy. But it also, but the vegan diet is better for the environment, and the vegan diet is better for our health. I mean, obviously, you know, so that's kind of how I, you know, how I look at it. And the thing about the environmental thing is that saves animals as well, because if you look at say animal farming and you look at fishing, those activities actually kill animals twice, because they kill the animals that are farmed and sent for slaughter, and they kill the fishes, but they also kill the animals that those activities have an impact on. In other words, the harm that animal farming causes to the environment kills other animals, kills wild animals, and the same within. So those things kill animals twice. So by stopping those things, we don't only spare the animals that are farmed or that are caught, we spare loads of other animals as well. And that's why kind of that's, you know, that's such an important thing, and it's becoming more and more evident in terms of the climate crisis, the huge role that animal agriculture is playing, and also, I mean, the fishing industry causes more greenhouse gases than the whole of aviation. It's actually because of the various reasons, you know, the harm it does to the ocean in terms of the ocean, you know.
You're basically monocropping in the ocean somehow.
Yeah, you know, so it's becoming more and more evident. I mean, there's a group called Climate Healers that have done a paper about the effect of animal agriculture, and they've come to the conclusion that it's 87%. You know, the blame for the climate crisis, 87% of it is animal agriculture.
Wow.
And the reason, the kind of main reason for that, I mean, obviously you get greenhouse gases given off by animal agriculture. You get methane, for instance. That's a very harmful greenhouse gas. But the main reason why animal agriculture is so harmful is because of the land it takes up, and that land, or so much of that land, if everyone, you know, all humans adopted a vegan diet, then we'd need far less land to feed ourselves, and all that land that was kind of spare could be rewilded, could go back to forest, or could go back to you know, marshland or something like that would kind of pull the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So we're preventing, you know, that from happening through animal agriculture. It's what's called opportunity costs. You know,
I call it shooting myself in the foot. That's what I call it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, but you know, like our humans say, we are shooting ourselves in the foot, and it's really interesting that, like, with the climate crisis and you know, you've got, you know, for instance, Extinction Rebellion, you're worried about our species going to become extinct because what we're doing to the planet, what we're doing to the climate. But, like, I think kind of what's sort of forgotten, and it's great that these people are getting active. It's brilliant. But what's kind of forgotten is, you know, the impact of the human species on the environment has already wiped out hundreds and hundreds of other animal species, you see. And, like, you know, there's this thing that says, well, our house is on fire, you know, the human house is on fire, and we need to put the fire out, we need to combat the climate crisis. We've already burnt down the houses of all those other animals, and yet where were people in the street then? Where were the protests then when we were doing that, see?
Humans are the fire. That's the problem. We're the fire.
Well, you see, the reason we have the climate crisis is to do with speciesism and to do with human supremacism. And the reason for that is that, first of all, a huge, you know, a huge contributor to that is animal farming and the fishing industry as well. So those speciesist industries, those human supremacist industries, contribute hugely to the climate crisis. But also in terms of, the other big contributor, obviously, is the burning of fossil fuels. But when you think, well, when did that really originate? And we're kind of talking about the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
You see, that's when that started. And of course, at the time, people started burning all this coal and stuff. That's where it started, the Industrial Revolution way back in the 1800s when it started. And those people didn't know that putting all this stuff in the atmosphere was going to cause the climate, contribute to the climate crisis. They didn't know that those were greenhouse gases. But what they did know was that what they were doing was massively harming animals in other ways. It was causing pollution. It was causing the destruction of habitat, and like wild animals were, suffering and dying in large numbers because of it. But like they didn't care because they thought, well, this is for the benefit of humans. I mean, it was for the benefit of certain humans.
This was not far from where you are. We're talking Britain in the 1850s or something.
Yeah, and also where I live is not far from a part of the country called the Black Country. It's kind of near Birmingham, and that's like the centre of it. Where it all came. Where it all sort of kind of really arose. One of the main industrial hubs at the time, where it kind of all started, and and then it spread everywhere, but that caused horrendous harm to the natural environment. And if people in those days had been vegan, they wouldn't have done it. They said, no, we can't do this. It's doing so much harm to other animals. We do this, and they wouldn't have done it. And if they didn't do it, we wouldn't have the kind of harm done to the climate.
But our society is based around this idolizing a form of ourselves, which is Jesus or Buddha or Allah, or we turn God into man. Rather than the Nordic people, they used to worship trees and the sun and stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a sense in which I think religion can be said to be the enemy of animal liberation. And I'm not talking about individual religious people. Mm-hmm. There's some, a lot of individual religious people that have been very good in terms of protecting animals. I'm not talking about individual people. I'm talking like about religion as a whole. Because it tends to be, it's kind of sort of based on, or it promotes human supremacism. It's sort of about, this idea of humans being made in the image of God. We're somehow special. We're somehow separate from other animals. We're more important. I mean, if
it always comes from the children. The children eventually ask, "Well, if Grandma goes to heaven, what happens to my dog?" And then they could start making stuff up. They're like, well, there's a...
Yeah, but you see kind of all that. And it kind of elevates, it's all about elevating humans to status that we kind of, we don't have. I mean, we're one species on Earth amongst millions of others. And there's no reason why, we should consider ourselves more important than those others. Why? Where does that arrogance come from? Yeah. And I think religion does encourage that. It encourages people, it encourages humans to think of themselves as special and above other animals and more important than other animals. And so in that sense, I think it's kind of harmful. In that sense, I think it is kind of the enemy of animal liberation for that reason.
Because it allows us to have a pillaging kind of point of view.
Well, the rest of nature, the rest of the natural world, everything else on Earth exists for us, the important ones. I mean, the thing about made in the image of God, I think, hell, God must be one ugly-looking dude, mustn't he? If humans are made in the image of God, what I mean?
Don't start telling me about your invisible sky monkey who knows everything.
Well, I think this is the problem and it's almost like as if humans have invented an imaginary man in the sky to justify the oppression of other animals.
Yeah, and people.
It's just well, and other people, yes, of course, as well. Yes, it has been used in that way, and so although I'd say that I know and have known a lot of people that are religious and they're really good people, lovely people. I don't think that's because they're religious. I think they're just good people anyway who happen to be religious.
Yeah.
I don't think religion makes anyone good. I think it can make people bad. I don't think it makes anyone good, and I think good people that are religious would be good anyway, with or without religion.
Yeah.
I think it's like a horrendous and totally irrational. It's just totally, you know what I mean? You might as well believe in Santa or the Tooth Fairy. I mean, the Tooth Fairy must be true. I've been left money by the Tooth Fairy. She must exist.
The Tooth Fairy never told me to kill people that don't believe in her.
No, I mean, I suppose you could get people that believed in the Tooth Fairy that went around killing people for their teeth.
Yeah,
if that really took on, that would be really quite, like someone shouting out Tooth Fairy Akbar and killing someone, putting him under the pillow.
Walking around with a necklace of teeth, yeah.
Yeah, you get a note from the Tooth Fairy, sorry, I haven't got the cash, when you take a bank transfer, But I always think, the Tooth Fairy's ageist, isn't it? I mean, why isn't there a denture fairy?
Yeah.
Well, denture fairy, why is it only for kids? Do you know what I mean? It's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, what about when I lose my teeth in a bar fight when I'm 40 years old? Do I still get a...
Well, you should do. Put them under the pillow. You never know. There might be a couple of dimes there for you, whatever,
Yeah.
Or, euros.
Yeah.
But yes, I think, this is something that humans will find any excuse they can to oppress other animals, and I think religion is one of them. Sadly, I think been used in that way. But the important thing is that we kind of find a solution to what's happening, and to other animals, and I believe that the solution is very much vegan education. And as much vegan education as we can do as often as possible in as many places as possible. And to do that, we need as many vegans as possible involved in that. And we also need as many vegans as possible instigating that, stimulating that. And if we get that, I think that's key. I think that's the kind of, if we get that, we'll get animal liberation. And by animal, in a widespread situation where animals aren't oppressed by humans, really.
One of my favorite mediums of propaganda is a vegan cookbook, and that's something that's easy to convert you.
Yeah, I think that food is a good way of getting through to people, and it's a good way of starting off a conversation, or starting off an educational process. For instance, there's got an organisation here in the UK called Animal Aid, and they produce this. It's a booklet. It's a recipe booklet, and it's called. Doesn't even say vegan. It's plant-based cooking on a budget. That's what it's called. And we always give it out to people when we're doing, information stands. We give this out to people because. It's not threatening. People see pictures of lovely vegan food. It's affordable. A lot of people got this idea that it's really expensive to eat vegan stuff when it's kind of not.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't have to be. In fact, it can be very much cheaper than, consuming animal products. So it's very attractive to people. But further on in the booklet, it's about the reasons for veganism, about the ethical reasons for veganism, what happens to the animals, and, all about the ethical stuff. So it's a good way of people take it and then they'll they've got the information about the food, but then they've got the information about the ethical reasons for veganism. And I think it's a very, very good way of educating people, because people will take that. Whereas if you just had a leaflet that was straight, had a picture of an animal, being slaughtered or something, people will want it. Oh, I don't want. Oh, no,
right. This is a big deal.
It's a kind of clever thing. So that's the kind of way where you can use food as like a gateway. See, I think gateways are important.
Yeah.
you have these gateways to kind of veganism where you don't necessarily hit people with a full-on vegan message straight away, but you lead them to something else.
Right.
You can do that with food events, with recipe booklets that also contain, information about the kind of ethical, or you can give people a recipe booklet and put a leaflet, brochure, or whatever inside it that gives the ethical reasons for veganism. That's another way of doing it.
Typical people, they run from pain and run to pleasure.
Yeah.
So
if we're going to educate people, we've got to understand something about the psychology, about how people work psychologically.
That's huge.
And so I think if you're doing an information stall stand, if you have posters that are too graphic or stuff that's too graphic, people won't go near. They'll go, "Oh, I don't see that."
Those people make me feel bad.
Yeah, that's right. But you have to pitch it in a way that it kind of attracts people, and then give them the information. Because if you don't attract them, you can't give them the information. And I think there's other ways of kind of there's other ways of doing it. Even kind of presenting what you're doing as something, a form of oppression of other animals that everyone's against. I mean, I used to, for many years, do like tables in the street, collecting signatures on petitions to protect whales and dolphins. And I had boards about, come along, sign and protect the whales and dolphins and all that. And I'd have the leaflets about the whales and dolphins, how they could kind of learn about it and they could do more. But when people came up to sign the petition, when I gave them leaflets, I always gave them vegan leaflets as well. See, so I thought, what's happening is I'm attracting people who care about some animals. They're not a complete arsehole that doesn't care about anything. They care about something, so there's something to work with, you see.
Yeah.
So you're filtering out the total waste of time people that you give a leaflet to, and that'd be a waste of time. But you've got something to go on with those people, you see. And so, and you can do it in other ways. Like, I mean, I recently did a stall. It was about kind of ending animal experiments, but there was particular focus on beagles. Beagle dogs are used a lot, and like people love them, and they'll, I'll sign that. This is disgusting. All right, give them when they get given the information. Give them. I was giving everyone copies of that booklet I told you about. All right, the information about the animal experiments and what they can do about that. Yeah, give them that. Give them one of those booklets as well. Oh, thank you very much. Can I really have this? Yes, you can. Lovely recipes in there, and then they'll learn about veganism. It's like a clever, it's kind of, sort of understanding people's psychology.
Yeah.
And so we don't necessarily have to be totally out front and go vegan.
You're right.
But we do.
And there's an army of young people out there that want to shove the dogma and beat people over the head with it. And I'm like, I'm too old and I know people too well to know that doesn't work so well. So,
yeah, I think you've got to understand people's psychology. You've got to be a bit crafty. You've got to be a bit clever, with it, a bit sneaky even.
That's my forte. Yeah.
You've got to be, because that, you've got to kind of find a way of because if people don't come up to you and if people don't take the information, how are they ever going to, how are they ever going to kind of be educated?
Yeah.
And we'll do, we'll do information stands at like local dog rescue events and local environmental events, like I said, and health events as well, where there's this connection with veganism or at least the connection with the vegan diet. Because you can go to a health event and say, can I have a stall at your event, or can we have a stall? We're promoting a healthy diet. Oh yeah, of course you can, right? Well, you're in then, and you're in. Once you're in there, you can give them. Oh, you give them recipes and that, but you give them information about the ethical reasons for vegans. But the point is, you're in there. See, the same with the environmental thing. That we're part of a local environmental alliance. Our vegan group locally. And that's great. It gives us the opportunity to have information tables and stuff at their events. And of course, you go in there on why a plant-based diet is better for the planet. That's what the reason you have the thing, right? And you give information out about that, but then you're also giving them information about, the ethical why it's kind of wrong to kill the cows and
let the kids pet like the decapitated heads of dead animals and say warp them, traumatize them just a little bit.
But you see, so you kind of got to be, you've got to kind of think outside the box in a sense with things about, the different routes where you can get information into people's heads, because that's what it's about. It's about getting the information to people. Yeah.
Let me ask you so for everybody at home, they want to know, how long have you been vegan for?
50 years. 50 years.
50 years vegan.
Yes, yeah.
Is he wasting away? No, he's just fine.
I'm fine. But it's funny enough, when I announced that I was going vegan, especially my dad wasn't very happy, but my mum was more angry. My dad just wanted to watch the television, really, but my mum was more on the case. I said, you've gone completely mad now. I said, you've gone completely mad. She said, I'm not cooking you any of that.
Right.
You'll be dead within a year. She said, dead within a year, you see. And so anyway, is it possible to have a little break now, because there's a cat outside?
Absolutely.
I've just got to see what's happening.
Pause. So everybody out there, go figure out how you can not only become vegan and become interested in animals and stuff, but go out there and spread that message.
Yeah, that's vitally important. I mean, of course, anyone listening that's not vegan, then I'd say, go vegan. I mean, it's like kind of it's probably the most important thing you can kind of do in your life in terms of preventing suffering and slaughter. I mean, there's every second of every day, 50,000 animals are killed for the food industry worldwide. And it's all totally unnecessary. We don't need to consume those animal products at all. And that's horrendous. And that's just the food industry. There's all these other ways that animals are oppressed as well, of course. But, so that's a horrendous situation. And so don't be, start off by not being part of it. Don't be part of it, And then
veganism also includes exploitation, not just eating them, but wearing them.
It includes exploitation, and I would say it includes oppression as well, in the sense that exploitation is using animals, whereas sometimes animals are harm is done to other animals where we don't use them, like where we destroy their habitat for some other reason or something like that, where it can't be described as use, but nevertheless it's oppression. So it's all of that. It's all about the tyranny that humans impose on other animals and ending that. And it's the most horrendous thing that's ever happened really in the history of the world. When the sheer scale of this, that number that's 50,000 saying that's just the food industry. If we add in all the other ways that animals are oppressed by other animals, are oppressed by humans, the animal experiments, the hunting, the fur trade, the environment, the habitat, then it could be twice that number.
And this is not even just about empathy. I mean, empathy is great, and you feel and you want equality for people and stuff, but we're talking about biodiversity in the sense that because we're doing this, it's also going to end up killing us in the end.
Well, absolutely, yes, because it is. It's something come back to kick us up the arse, isn't it? What we've done to the other animals now is finally, we've wiped out all these other species, and now it's us. It's like our arse is on the line now, and that's everyone's panicking now. Oh God, we're going to, It's funny, I said the name of someone I don't believe in. But we all do that. We all do. Yeah. It's so ingrained into us, isn't it, from birth? But we do. And this is the thing, that this is kind of, our tyranny has come back to, to destroy us.
Yeah.
And so the base of everything is vegan. If everyone had been vegan, we wouldn't be in the shit we're in now. It wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have done those things that led to this.
Yeah.
It really wouldn't. And so, so therefore, if the fundamental cause of it is speciesism, the fundamental cause of it is human supremacism, then the fundamental solution to it is to end those things. The fundamental solution to it is veganism.
Yeah.
And so that's the fundamental way that we really combat all these things, is by becoming vegan and educating other people to go vegan. And if we're successful in doing that, we can completely transform the world. We can have a world that's kind of great for other animals, and we can have a world that's so much better for ourselves as well.
This is huge. Now, a lot can be said about just having a murderous attitude about one thing. I mean, I'm sure that it would equate to less violence in reality if we not just get with the vegan, but also get rid of the capitalistic industrialist pillaging kind of point of view.
Yeah, well, you see, this is another aspect of, you see, there's a real sense in which animal liberation isn't consistent with capitalism. It's not. And the reason is because capitalism is the driver of environmental destruction. It encourages greed, encourages acquisition, encourages consumption. It's encouraging industrialization and all these kind of activities that are harmful to the natural world and therefore harmful to the animals that inhabit that natural world. And so capitalism isn't consistent with animal liberation, so therefore it's not consistent with veganism either. I mean, there've been systems that have described themselves as socialist that haven't been consistent they've described themselves as socialists, whether they really were is another question. Yeah. That haven't been consistent with animal liberation. But I think that it is something that would, I say, be consistent with animal liberation, something like eco-socialism or even green anarchism, where you've got that aspect in it. You've got respect for the natural world as well as wanting equality and proper treatment and social justice, for humans. So it would be some kind of that kind of socialist stroke anarchist system that would be the system we need, not capitalism.
Yeah, I almost argued for eco-fascism, but I don't want to go down the road of fascism. But the idea that if you littered on the side of the road, that they would just, guillotine you right there on the spot.
Well, that would probably stop littering a little bit, wouldn't it? Yeah. But yeah, depending on where you dispose of the body, I suppose it would make a difference. But I think we kind of, I think if we educate enough people to go vegan, then, we would never need really to do anything like that, because, the general social consensus would be kind of against people. I mean, I think action would be needed to be taken against people that did litter and did do stuff, and they maybe need to be sent to some moral re-education centre or something, so they could learn good habits. I think that would probably be the answer that we'd have. It'd be to do with education. These people need to be re-educated
somehow.
But it would be very much. But if the kind of ethos of general ethos of society was that people didn't do that, then very few people would kind of do it. Whereas now, because it's like this selfish attitude just goes through everyone from governments, it's just capitalism is about selfishness. So therefore, if an ordinary person is selfish, well, kind of what example have they been given? They've been given an example of greed and acquisition. So that if they are then like that in their own personal life, it's hardly surprising, is it? Whereas if you had an administration the same example, then that would then make a difference to how people actually live their lives personally, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what we're aiming for. But how do we get that administration? They'd need to be kind of voted in. So they need to be, they need to gain power through popular support.
Yeah.
And so that, that's only going to happen if we have a lot more people who are vegan, and that's the only way that's ever going to happen. It's not going to happen with the current nature of society and how most ordinary people are now. It's never going to happen.
Most importantly, we need to get corporate money out of politics, because every time that somebody pokes their head up and says they want to do something that is free or makes no money or is just doing it for the common good, it absolutely can't exist in a capitalist system.
Yeah, yes, well, absolutely. But you see, once again, really, it comes back to, if we're going to end that, then we have to be the people that have to say, we've got to be like a really strong force in society to put a stop to that. And once again, that's down to vegan education and getting far more people on side with our ideas.
Like you said, whether it's socialism, you said socialism has never really had its day, but maybe we've never just done it right, because it's supposed to be for the common good of everything and everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been an idea that it was just to do with humans. But like if you kind of are incorporating, the whole of the natural world within that and all other animals, rather like ecosocialism does, where you've got anti-speciesism involved in that as well.
Yeah.
In addition to human supremacism, then, what I would call it, I'd say, what we need is like an animal liberationist society, where the kind of main ethos of society is one where we believe in animal liberation and we kind of want to achieve that and to combat any forces that are against that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how what we need to achieve. And once again, that means, we need a lot more vegans, because it's not going to happen otherwise. It really isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think you've got groups that try to move the government, that try to say, well, we're going to do these protests to try and, make the government act in a certain way that we want to.
Yeah.
And invariably, those things fail. They may succeed sometimes to some small extent, but in general, they don't really achieve very much, because you're up against a government that has an ideology.
Mm-hmm.
That they believe in a certain thing, and they're not going to be swayed from that, because that's their fundamental ideology.
Yeah.
And so whatever it's like banging your head against a brick wall. And so you have to change the government. The only way of really doing it is change the government, is change the administration, kind of radically.
And to do that, you have to change the culture.
To do that, you have to change the culture, and change the culture, you have to change ordinary people. You see, because there's a lot of talk about, how do we change things? Is it personal change or is it system change? And it's kind of talked about as if these are two separate things.
Yeah.
But they're not, because personal change causes system change. Because if we're going to change the system, we're going to change the administration, the whole way things are run. You only do that through personal change, because who's going to vote in the radical administration? Who are going to be the politicians that form part of the radical progressive administration? They're going to come from ordinary people. They're going to come from the population, aren't they? So you have to educate the population, so you get the right people. You get the right people that want to be politicians, or the left people, I should say.
Yeah. Well, right now, at least the vegans are on a good way. 2010 marked the biggest increase in a vegan population. We also had, we have some of the best looking people, the smartest people, the most famous people. So the tide is turning. We just need to give it an extra push in that direction.
I think that's right. And I think the reason why, the reason why there are people from all different walks of life becoming vegan is just because the general number of vegans is increasing. And so, like, if you want more vegan politicians, for instance, you just have to educate more people to be vegan.
Yeah, right.
Because some of them will become politicians. Are going to be good footballers, and some of them are going to be good musicians and whatever. And so it all comes down to vegan education, and that is why it's because it's a really wonderful thing to be part of. If someone can think, I was part of that, we achieved this really radical change in society, really progressive change that liberated animals from, these thousands and thousands of years of oppression, and that ended this horrific oppression of animals and this horrific slaughter, if someone can say to themselves, I was part of that, I played a part in changing that, what a wonderful thing to say.
Yeah.
Rather than live your life, without consequence, just go through the motions and just live and die and not really achieving anything.
Right.
To have been part of that, I think is wonderful. Even part of that in a small way. If someone can only be part of that in a small way because they've got other things going on, great. It's still part of it.
Right.
That is something that's not just, doing something for the good of others and especially for the good of other animals, but it's kind of doing something for yourself in a way to give your life that real value.
Yeah. I mean, we're at 5% of the population maybe is vegan all the way, but it's growing all the time. But when we get to the 50% or 60%, the extra 20% will just follow right after, because that's how people are.
It's a kind of tipping point. And I've heard that, there's a big tipping point at about 25%.
Okay.
That once an idea is taken up by 25% of the population, it rapidly spreads. And you see, if you kind of even look at politics now, our government, the government here in the UK is getting worse all the time.
Yeah.
And certainly worse for animals. They're rapidly ditching all their proposed ideas for protecting animals. Getting worse.
This Rees-Mogg guy, I don't like him.
He hates vegans. He thinks that,
Did you see the interview of him when he was a kid, when he was like 7? They were like, what do you want to do with your life? He's like, I want to buy more shares of stock and become the president of this company. I was like, you're such a loser.
They should have got rid of him then, really, shouldn't they?
Right.
And you see, this is the thing, and it's kind of it is getting worse all the time, we the only way of doing something about that is to replace them by at least somebody that's a bit better than them, even though they're not perfect, and kind of we kind of have to. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore, the effect of the type of government we have.
Yeah.
We just can't ignore that. So if we ignore it, then they want us to, because then they can be in power forever. Then
right. Apathy is not a strategy at this point. We need
no, it's not a strategy. No, it's not. And we have to kind of, and politics is really important. I mean, I'm not a politician. I'm a campaigner, but I help politicians. I've campaigned for vegan politicians to try and get them elected.
Yeah.
And kind of help run their campaigns and stuff, because that's where my strengths are, but someone else, their strengths might be as a politician. Whatever someone's strength is, use that to promote veganism. If you're an artist, you're like good at sport, better.
We need everybody. I will say,
everyone.
There's a great story that from a long time ago when I think it was the Middle Ages, and I think it was in Britain, where they decided that every animal should have its day in court, and they should all they have their own rights, and they tried to make them equal. Well, there was this situation where the rats kept eating the crops, and they said, well, you can't just kill the rats, okay? So you have to communicate with them somehow, and so they started putting up signs everywhere for the rats to read that says, do not eat these crops. Well, the rats can't read. And so eventually this whole thing kind of dissipated, where they realized that animals can't, defend themselves in the current legal system at that time and stuff. But, But people had been trying.
Yeah, I think so. But coming back to what I was just saying now, one thing that I kind of forgot to say, and it's to do with the percentages, that this government we got now, they were elected by only 30% of the electorate, less than 30% of the electorate.
Liz Truss.
So, well, it was Boris Johnson who was elected.
Okay.
The Conservative Party was elected. And at the time of the election, Boris Johnson was the leader, and he's been now replaced by Liz Truss. But they won the election with a huge majority. with only 30% of the electorate. In other words, 30% of people eligible to vote. That's all they got. That's all we need. I mean, that seems, isn't it terrible that they kind of came to power and only 30% of people voted for them.
30%.
Well, 30%. But by the same token, all we need is 30% or less. That's all we need, isn't it? And then we can kick ass then. And that's what we've got to look for. We've got to do, because like either we kick their ass or they kick our ass. Yeah. There's not another.
Let's be honest about the state of the world. It's dog eat dog world there. Kill or be killed.
Well, I think it's kind of just the way humans operate and just the way the kind of system operates. That's how it is.
Yeah.
And if we want to move as rapidly as possible towards animal liberation, we have to take account of that. We can't kind of ignore that, and we have to kind of use that to our advantage, And so that's why, it's really important to be, analytical about how things work, like about how ordinary people work, first of all, but also about kind of, in a sense, how the kind of system works, how the political system works, and to think, well, how can we, how do we play these games so that we win?
Right.
We have to do that.
Yeah, we have to learn their language and play their game in order to get this done.
Yeah. And then once we're there, we can then change it. Once we're there, we've got the power to then change it and create a fairer, a more democratic system, a fairer electoral system, a fairer society. But unless we first of all obtain the power to be able to do that, we're never going to be able to do it.
We're waiting for rationality to come back because our arguments are probably the most sensible out of.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's no, the argument for veganism is kind of totally rational and totally logical. It's just getting enough people to listen to that and take it on board. And to do that, we need to have enough people spreading that message.
Well, that being said, we've done 2 hours now. We're going to have you come back. We'll do it again in, a month or so. Whenever. I don't care. You come back. We can talk about animals all the time.
There's always other aspects of things to talk about. It's kind of never ending.
Yeah.
And, there's things happening all the time that kind of can be discussed in relation to the overall struggle, things happening all the time. But, my final words just to, if people listen that aren't vegan, go vegan. It's the most important thing you can do, best thing you can do in your life. If you are vegan but you're not an activist, become an activist. And if you are an activist, become an instigator. Become like one of these golden vegans that gets other people to go with you and be active, where you live really in your local community, and so that we can have vegan education everywhere and educate everyone.
And for my one guaranteed listener out there, Mom, go vegan.
Yes. You never know.
Yeah.
I hope she's not your only listener.
Yeah, no. We're strong and growing here.
Oh, that's good. That's well, it'd be great talking to you, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah. We'll schedule it. All right. Mr. Ronnie Lee, everybody. Wave goodbye to all the people. Bye.